Welcome back. Well, we see 2025 has been quite the year. Earlier, we see the United States designated Nigeria as a country of particular concern and carried out security action in northern Nigeria targeting, ISIS-linked groups. Beyond the security headlines, this move raised deeper questions for investors, policymakers, and businesses. How does global perception of risk, how does that shape capital flows? What does this mean for Nigeria's growth outlook, currency stability and fiscal space, in 2026? Let's examine how, geopolitics is feeding into Nigeria's economic forecasts and what lies ahead. Joining me for this conversation, we have Basil, Abia, co-founder, Truva Intelligence, joining me from our Abuja studios. Great to have you on the show. Compliments of the season.
Compliments of the season, Ladi, and I wish you the best year in 2026.
I wish you the very best too. But we have a lot of forecasts rolling in at this point from investment houses. We also have from the Central Bank of Nigeria. They have their economic outlook for 2026, and they're seeing a GDP growth of about 4.49%. That's projected for 2026. Headline inflation expected to ease significantly, with estimates around about 12.94%. For the external sector, they're seeing the reserves hitting $51 billion. Current account, they expect a surplus. Fiscal and debt metrics, fiscal deficit about 12.14 trillion. That's about 3.01% of GDP. Public debt to GDP about 34.68% by end of 2026. These are projections by the CBN. And we have a couple of other projections for 2026. And now we have, what's played out in 2025. Talk to me about how significant, the U.S. Designation of Nigeria as a country of particular concern, from a markets and investor risk perspective. How does this shape, most of the forecasts, we're seeing, going into 2026? Do we really need to take this into consideration?
Yes, Ladi, it's very important to take this into consideration. In fact, I was talking to a number of macroeconomists yesterday, and right now the consensus is that there's a volatility premium that has to be put into forecasts now. So most of the models that a lot of these investment houses and even the CBN has put out, there should be a recalibration of that. There should be a rejigging of those models, largely because of the perception risk that these attacks on Nigeria's macroeconomy and geopolitical future have. And it's very important to highlight that this is the most unprecedented kinetic action by the United States of America on Nigerian soil. Probably the only other publicly available information of a kinetic engagement was in the year 2020 when there was an extraction by the U.S. Navy SEALs of an American citizen somewhere between our border and that of Niger. So this is a very profound military engagement, and there's a lot of evidence, both in public and, of course, in private intelligence lens, to highlight that these kinetic engagements will continue, these military strikes will continue. I'll give you some insights that are not publicly available, of course. There's a new United States national security strategy document that was put out in November 2025. And in that document, particularly in page 29, there's also mention of Africa and critical minerals consolidation in page 23, as well as in page 28. But in this 33-page document, in page 29, there is a mention particularly of the intention to go into sub-Saharan Africa and counter Islamic, and I quote, Islamic terror networks in sub-Saharan Africa. And there's no doubt about the fact that this has now been corroborated by the engagement that happened on Christmas Day, or in some parts of Nigeria just after Christmas. Now, there's also some correlation, so to say, about another intention of the new U.S. national security strategy, which is to support a number of geopolitical engagements of their allies in the Middle East, where there's further adoption of the Abraham Accords by the Muslim world. And I'm quoting directly from that document that is not really popular in policy spaces here in Nigeria. So what am I trying to say here? What I'm trying to say here is that when this document was published in November 2025, people weren't paying attention. But just last week, Somaliland got recognized by Israel, and there is reliable intel saying that part of the negotiations for that recognition by Israel was that Somaliland will take 1.5 million Palestinians from Gaza particularly. So if you're correlating or inferring from this policy document, you're saying that there is a level of veracity to it. And if you connect it with that of Nigeria, in that same document, they're saying that they're going to engage kinetically against Islamic terror groups, while also concurrently deploying commercial diplomacy as well as consolidating critical mineral supply chain developments on behalf of the United States. So what I'm basically trying to say with these available documents, as well as with available open source intelligence, we should expect a continuity of these kinetic engagements, particularly military strikes in northwest and northeast Nigeria. In fact, there is reliable OSINT, or open source intelligence, that in the coming weeks, most of the attacks, largely led by the MQ Reaper drones that the United States Army has, they will deploy it on the northeast positions, particularly the Tumbuns of the Lake Chad. Tumbuns basically is another technical language or colloquial language for the islands that most of this ISWAP terror and JAS terror groups or terror targets actually stay in. So to answer your question more precisely, there is now a volatility premium risk that has to be infused to all the forecasts, especially with regards foreign direct investment as well as domestic investment. Especially, for instance, imagine if you want to make a final investment decision on some critical minerals assets in north-central Nigeria, and now there's, intelligence that there are going to be drone attacks as well as surface-to-surface missile attacks from the Gulf of Guinea hovering over. Let's not forget that shrapnels and missile fuel boosters were found in Offa. They were also found in parts of Sokoto outside of the actual sphere of the attack, in Tangaza local government area, particularly in Bauni Forest. And now it's in Bauni Forest that the two ISIS-affiliated target camps were actually, hit. And according to ground truthing from ground troops, particularly from the division of the Operation Fasanyama in Sokoto and in Kebbi, the ground truthing has confirmed that a number of fatalities have been incurred on the side of the ISIS-affiliated target groups. There's also open source intelligence now confirming thermal activity there, basically corroborating the veracity of the attacks, and also open source intelligence saying that there are now craters that you can obviously see. Now, basically, right. The technical language for that is that if you deploy a VIIR thermal system, which is a near real-time oversee of geospatial data, you'll be able to see the impact or the battleground impact of any missile attack.
All right, thank you for painting that picture there, and definitely you feel sometimes that some of these risks might be priced in or somehow, or maybe not. But how do you think local investors, international investors, how do you think they'll navigate all of this that could happen in 2026? Because geopolitics, that was with us in 2025, but it seems it's also going to follow into 2026.
Yes, I think what geopolitical experts are saying that, and they said it a lot in 2025, is because of a Trump-led geopolitical sphere right now globally, you have to prepare for anything. In all honesty, like what were the odds that in January when we spoke about the forecast for Nigeria in 2025, what were the odds that we were going to get our first missile attack from a U.S. military source? Almost 0%. In that sense, but it happened, so with a Trump-led geopolitical sphere, it's very important to prepare for the worst, and this is the advice, this is the volatility premium risk that I was talking about. Now, let me go into more specifics. There are a number of sectors that will be shielded from the kinetic engagement of the United States military on Nigerian soil. We're already seeing or hearing that in whispers in terms of industry intelligence. For instance, deep offshore investments. We should expect higher activity or increased activity in terms of foreign direct investment in our deep offshore oil sector, because according to whispers in the industry, thanks to the hard work of Madame Olu Verheijen, there are particular expectations that at least 2 oil majors would invest in new deep offshore projects. That should bring significant amounts of foreign direct investment into the country. So they would largely be shielded because, again, if you're looking at the kinetic strategy of the Americans, they're mostly going to use their drone systems to attack in the northeast, and in the northwest they'll probably continue to use their guided missile destroyer located just around. We don't know the specific location. Obviously, Austin has failed in that regard, but we know that it's on the Gulf of Guinea that a guided missile destroyer called the USS Paul Ignatius is located, and they're going to continue their surface-to-surface missile attacks based on, as well as informed by intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance that has been carried out by the United States Africa Command in Germany since late October. So to answer your question more specifically, there are a number of sectors that will be shielded. Regardless, however, everyone should prepare for the worst. And then if you are exposed in northern Nigeria in terms of fiscal investment, so for instance, maybe you're now considering or you've already bought certain assets for geological surveys because you're getting into the Nigerian critical minerals frenzy, then you need to be able to do some risk insurance. It's very important to do that. If you're going to have a lot of portfolio exposure into FMCGs, fast-moving consumer goods, or agriculture in northern Nigeria, you should also get some risk insurance. It's very important because right now it's very likely that the theater of activity, not only just in terms of the U.S. intervention, but likely interventions from even Turkey, for instance. The news from Turkey that they just detained over 370 ISIS members in Turkey. So there's going to be a lot of activity in northern Nigeria, and you should be able to either de-risk or insure your exposure.
Right, and I guess, just like, any other year, just get your hedges right, going to, the new year. Fantastic. Thank you so much for helping us unpack this, and definitely we hope for the very best in 2026 for all of us. Thank you, Basil Abia, as a co-founder, Truva Intelligence. Thank you for coming on, and compliments of the season, and I'll see you in 2026.
Happy New Year, everyone.
All right, we'll take a moment now.